Hello, Recapped Mystery here, happy to see you again. Today, I'm going to explain a romantic, drama film, 5 Feet Apart. Watch out and take care. The film begins with Stella Grant reflecting on the importance of human touch since she never realized how important it was until she couldn't obtain a certain person's touch. Stella is shown in the following scene with her companions Maya and Camille. Camille, on the other hand, tells the others that she might be able to hook up with a guy on a trip Stella won't be able to make. Stella makes a lighthearted jest about Maya's Photoshop talents before bidding her companions goodnight. When they go, Stella puts on her nose cannula and gets ready for her treatments. She was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis and is now in the hospital. Her nurses, Barb and Julia, who provide her treatments, join her as she records her podcast. They also informed her that Poe, her best friend, was sleeping in another room. Barb turns Stella's med cart over to Stella before the nurses leave, giving Stella authority over her meds, which is understandable given Stella's OCD. Despite her brave front, Stella settles into her pattern of taking her medicine, marking off tasks on her to-do list, and coding on her computer. Later that night, Barb informs Stella of a new baby in the maternity unit, so she goes to investigate. She walks by a sleeping Poe before passing another CF patient who is prepared to invite his pals to have sex in his room. Cringe. Stella continues her journey. Stella is followed to the maternity unit by the boy who noticed her. He attempts to introduce himself, but Stella dismisses him since she despises rule breakers who allow their buddies to have sex in their chambers. They argue until Barb comes and is shocked to see both of them in the same room. Kfers must stand 6 feet apart to avoid contaminating each other with bacteria. Barb reveals the boy's name as she pushes him away, Will Newman. Stella's name is also revealed by her. Will advises Stella to relax and not take life so seriously before leaving. After Will has left, Barb confesses that he has B. capacia, a dangerous bacteria, and is taking part in a clinical trial. She advises Stella to avoid Will. Will gets online later that night to watch Stella's video. He learns everything there is to know about her and grows to like her. Poe calls Stella the next day and tells her he is single. Poe starts to choke as they joke about being single. Stella and the nurses run to his aid, but he is simply choking on his food and is well. Meanwhile, Will and his mother, Meredith, meet with Dr. Hamid, who urges Will not to interact with any other Kfers for their and his own safety, before encouraging him to continue to his medical regimen so that the clinical trial can take place. Cole agrees, but not enthusiastically. Stella spots Will lounging on the roofs later that night while she FaceTimes her pals. She goes up to tell him to come down and that he doesn't realize how fortunate he is to be there, but all he does is joke around. He pretends to fall from the roof after she urges him to leave if he doesn't want to be there. Stella walks off the rooftop, upset. Stella afterwards can't concentrate because of Will, so she goes to his room. When she realizes he isn't sticking to his regimen, she becomes agitated and returns to the maternity unit, where Will joins her. She advises him to get back into shape because it is interfering with her OCD. Will only agree to fix up if she allows him to draw her. Despite her initial reluctance, she agrees to the bargain. She directs him to bring a med cart inside his room. Will encounters Poe. Will explains to Poe how he obtained B. capacia. Poe then discloses that Will's arrogance is most likely the source of Stella's recent agitation. He tells Will that, despite her issues with control, Stella has assisted him with his regimen. Will believes Poe has feelings for Stella. Despite his agreement, Poe confesses that he is gay. In the following scenario, Barb brings Will a med cart because he requested it. She warns him not to make her regret this. Stella later assists Will in organizing his med cart while Will and Poe keep an eye out for Barb. As she walks away, she hands him an app she created to assist him track his treatment. This girl is really well organized. Poe later informs Stella that he knows she likes Will. Later, she calls Will to see if he's sticking to his timetable. She resolves to undertake their regimen together after discovering that he is still slacking. Will doesn't mind because he knows she's always seeking for ways to spend time with him. Despite the stupid joke, they end up spending time together while sticking to their routine. Following that, Stella's mother, Erin, pays her a visit at the hospital. Erin tells Stella that she adores her and doesn't know what she'd do without her. Later, Dr. Hamid investigates an infection that has developed around Stella's G-tube. Stella goes to the gym to work out with Will after Dr. Hamid suggests that they monitor the infection. Will reminds Stella that he wants to draw her as they work out. Stella poses for Will after their workout. After much nagging, Will discovers Stella's lists. When she tells him about her list, he asks why it isn't more adventurous. He informs her that if he had a bucket list, it would involve traveling throughout the world. At the very least, traveling the world is preferable to being confined within the confines of a hospital. Stella appreciates him expressing something genuine. This draws them closer together. Stella later watches a video of her sister, Abby, skydiving. Meanwhile, Julia is giving Will his medication. She informs Will that she enjoys watching him be optimistic. In a vulnerable moment, Will asks her, "What if the drugs don't work?" Julia inquires, "What if they do?" Will then presents Stella with a cartoon of herself. Stella video calls Will, approaches him to inquire why he portrayed her as a cartoon, but as they converse, Will discovers one of Abby's paintings hanging behind Stella. Will requests to see more of Abby's images, but Stella grows uneasy and advises them to keep taking their medication together before hanging up on Will. Will and his buddies then watch a video of Abby singing to Stella while scrolling through Abby's social media. They see Abby hasn't posted in over a year. Later, Will joins Stella in meditation and says that he knows Abby is no longer alive. In uproar, Stella doesn't want to talk about death because, following Abby's death, she doesn't want to die on her parents' shoulders. Will realizes that Stella's regimen is so severe because of this. He informs her that she is suffering from survivor's guilt and that she should quit trying to control everything. Stella is irritated and storms away. Stella later complains to Poe about Will. She immediately blames herself for Abby's death, but Poe encourages her to stop because it wasn't her fault. Later, while Will attempts in vain to contact Stella, Dr. Hamid informs her that the infection has worsened and she must have surgery. Stella feels dissatisfied, but Dr. Hamid reminds her that she is a warrior. Stella pretends to be encouraged, but when Dr. Hamid departs, she slumps into her bed in despair. Will then slides an apology drawing to Stella. Stella opens out to Will, telling him he is forgiven before informing him that she will have surgery the next day. Will, who is concerned, attempts to discuss it, but Stella rejects him. Stella then had a sleepless night before her surgery the next day. Will slips into the prep area while she is waiting and performs the same song Abby sang for Stella before surgery. He flees moments later when the physicians arrive. He does, however, come across Barb, who marches him off to his room. Will tries to play it down, but Barb tells him about a Kfir's couple who went too near and died on her watch. She'd be damned if she allowed something like that happen again. Stella undergoes surgery at the same time. Stella awakens the next day to a surprise. Meanwhile, Will decides to ignore Stella's phone call because he doesn't want to hurt her with his B. Capesa. Stella eagerly anticipates seeing Will when she fully recovers, unaware that Will is still upset. Stella wants to see Will after Poe informs her that he will not be coming to see her, but Will turns her away. Poe tries to convince her to leave Will because Will, like Abby, is a risk taker, but this only irritates Stella, who tells him he isn't either. She rushes off after urging Poe to keep his advice to himself. Following that, the trio wallows in their own despair. This changes when Poe gives Stella a present admitting she was correct. Stella and Poe subsequently meet for makeup. Stella then observes a sign in the reception area and has an inspiration. Stella later slips a sketch beneath Will's door before sending him a video in which she informs Will that, despite the hazards posed by B. Capisha, she is prepared to get within 5 feet of someone she loves. She then knocks on Will's door and asks him if she can come within 5 feet of her. Will accepts, and they agree to meet on a later date. After changing, the pair meets at the reception area, where they use a pool stick to keep the 5-foot gap. Stella discovers during the date that Will's 18th birthday is tomorrow. Stella later explains, when they're sitting by a pool, that Abby died while jumping on a trip Stella was too sick to go on. Will comforts her before telling her she is lovely. They both undress before diving into the pool. Later, when Stella is telling Will about the lights on the horizon, Barb notices they aren't in their rooms. She asks Poe where they are, but Poe, who is sleeping, appears to be too tired to answer. Poe, on the other hand, cautions his pals after Barb abandons him. Stella runs to the maternity ward after they separate and pretends to be asleep. This deceives Barb, who calms down after discovering Stella. Will contacts Stella the next day, overjoyed because it's his birthday. Stella can't spend out with him right now because she's studying. Will is fine because he intends to spend time with his buddies. However, it looks that his pals are also inaccessible. Worse, Will's mother just sent him a message, so he'll be spending his birthday alone. Later that night, Stella guides Will through a game of hide-and-seek and a set of balloon clues to his surprise party, which Stella had prepared with Will's pals. Poe later informs Stella that he and his lover Michael are going to meet his mother tomorrow. Poe is in love, and Stella is overjoyed for him. Later in the evening, as the party continues, Abby appears, and the guests raise their glasses to her in honor of her full life. However, as the celebration progresses, Barb, who they assumed was missing that night, smashes into it and ends it. She locks Poe and Stella in their rooms and informs Will that he will be transported the next day. Despite this, Will and Stella continue to enjoy face-to-face communication. The next day, however, Barb and Julia discover Poe's death. Stella is distressed. Will tries to comfort her by stroking her, but she pushes him away before destroying everything in her room, including Poe's present. Meanwhile, Will packs his belongings and departs. Stella observes the lights and decides to investigate. At the reception, she notices Will. Will tries to talk Stella out of departing, but Stella, who now wants to live, persuades Will to follow her. They arrive at a hill and construct snow angels. Stella also displays the Will doll that Abby gave her when she was initially hospitalized. They take a break shortly after walking up to a frozen lake. Back at the hospital, Dr. Hamid informs the staff that a set of Stella's lungs is on its way. Barb rushes to Stella's room to prepare her for surgery, but the room is vacant. They text Stella, who decides to ignore the call and instead hang out with Will. Will declares his love for her. Stella runs over to him and knocks him over before declaring her love for him. They almost kiss, but Will intervenes because he doesn't want to infect Stella. When the ice begins to shatter, they flee. Back at the hospital, the medical personnel and Meredith and Stella's parents look for their children. Meredith sends Will a text message notifying him about the lungs. He attempts to persuade Stella to return to the hospital, but Stella refuses the lungs. Stella falls onto the ice as they argue. Stella, who appears to be in good health at first, slips through the ice just as Will attempts to assist her. He is able to pull her out of the water, but is obliged to do CPR on her. Stella is initially unresponsive, but she soon recovers. Stella and Will arrive at the hospital in the following scenario. Stella is opposed to the procedure, but Will persuades her to have it. Will admits to doing CPR on Stella, but Dr. Hamid advises him to worry about it later. Stella then undergoes her procedure while the others wait. They find out later that the surgery was successful. Will and Meredith later discover that Stella was not infected with B. capacea. Unfortunately, they discover that Will's remedies were ineffective. Later, when Stella heals, Will seeks aid from Meredith, Stella's parents, and the hospital staff. After Stella awakens, they show her a video in which Will informs her that, while the trials failed, the last month with her was the finest of his life. His sole regret is that she never saw the light of day. Outside her room, he puts on a light show for her. He then informs her that if he genuinely loves her, he must leave her in order for her to survive. He then requests that she close her eyes so he may go. When he walks away, Erin hands her Will's paintings of her, which crush her heart. Stella re-emphasizes the value of touch in one's life in the last moments, as she goes over her memories, particularly those of Will, before imploring everyone to touch their loved ones. The story is a fantastic example of how even the most contagious disease cannot destroy pure love, whether in contact or not. The end. Please subscribe to assist the channel, turn on notification and leave a like. Thank you for taking the time to watch. See you again soon.